I failed my first semester, but that did not hold me back from graduating with 4 degrees years later. After failing that semester, I had to really reflect and make an immediate change, otherwise I would not have been where I ended up. There were 6 things that I did that took me out of that stunt and that failure mindset and took me to a point where I was able to graduate with a first and then was able to go ahead and do a master's, PhD and another degree afterwards, just a few years later. The first is that I had to reframe my approach. I was aiming too much for perfection. So instead of perfection, I started to aim for mastery. A genius doesn't aim to be flawless from the beginning. They aim to improve continuously and be persistent and consistent in the work that they're doing to then get better and be the best at what they do, but not from the beginning. Before I recognized this, I was really stressed and kind of focused on grades and numbers and percentages, and I wasn't focused on learning the core concepts and understanding kind of the core material. So when I decided that, you know what, I'm going to go for mastery, I'm going to make sure that I understand the topic, and then anything that comes up in my exams or my coursework, I will feel confident in, then I started to succeed exponentially. I started to set goals that were to do with like understanding mini concepts and understanding this subject rather than just focusing on deadlines. And through this, I was able to retain so much more information and be able to actually be good at what I know rather than just being good at passing exams and actually failing them. The second is that I created my own personalized learning framework. So I was living at university and obviously, you know, I'm looking at what everyone else does and I'm following like what everyone else is doing. They're doing late nights, they're doing like all-nighters in the library, and I was copying them. But that did not work for me. I don't work well doing an all-nighter because by that point I'm just so tired. I work much better sleeping at a good time and waking up early and doing a really strong burst, like 3-4 hours in the morning just after sunrise. So I decided that I'm going to give myself my own schedule and not follow the crowd and not follow what everyone else was doing. And that is when I started to see success and changes in my grades. Look at your past mistakes, like what's working for you? Are you focusing in certain areas? Is your environment working? Are the people working around you? The way that you're studying, the way that you're learning. Not everyone is a visual learner. Not everyone learns from seeing things or just visually. There's different ways of learning. So try to understand your learning style and adapt and tailor kind of your schedule to what works best for you. The third thing I did was I adopted deliberate practice that had a specific strategy behind it. So I made sure that I identified all of the key areas in all of my modules that was particularly challenging, and I tried to find out which kind of topics came up quite regularly, like which topics were the core topics. And then I would deliberately make sure to give myself the hardest questions as practice. So I knew that I could do the easy questions. I knew that that was not a problem, but I focused more on the questions that were difficult. I gave myself a difficult task to do every single day, and I broke it down into like chunks. So if it was a hard question, I'd do like a little bit at one part, try to look at a textbook at another time and try to break it down. But I really found that being strategic in how you want to learn information and knowing that you're picking out the challenging bits really helps in forcing you essentially, basically forcing you to learn the information that you don't want to learn. You want to actively engage with information until you feel super comfortable with it and giving yourself uninterrupted time to be able to actually do that. The fourth thing I did was I leveraged the power of feedback loops. I gave myself a bit of a performance review, like a job. I gave myself a review of how I have done that month or that week or that study session every time. So I didn't leave it for an exam result to come that was a failure again for me to then say, oh my God, what am I doing wrong? Instead, at the end of every day or the end of every work session, I'd reflect on that work session and I'd make it a very explicit thing. So I'd look at it and I'll say, okay, so you managed to do 2 modules today. What was the issue? You didn't quite understand that topic, which took you a lot longer to kind of overcome, which is why you got less done. Okay, so next time, this is what you're going to do. So I constantly reviewed myself. I constantly critiqued myself, not in a negative way, of course, but I constantly gave myself space to figure out whether what I was doing was working or not, and then immediately changing it to make it better. We tend to leave too much time between kind of reflection. We tend to leave it to like an exam grade or something quite a lot bigger to happen for us to feel like, oh, things need to change. If you reflect every single day, you will never get to that stage. And that is what I ended up doing. And that's how I ended up passing from that first semester. I didn't fail a single thing after that. The fifth thing I did was I built a really resilient routine, but with times of rest. Once I failed, it was a bit of a wake-up call, honestly. It was the first semester, and I'd been a high-achieving student through my GCSEs, through my A-levels in high school. I've always done really well. So I was like, how am I failing? What have I done? So it made me really put in really strict discipline and practices in place. But at the same time, if you're a genius, you know that you need to rest, because the brain does not reset if there's no rest. So I made sure that I said to myself, okay, between these days and these hours, you're going to do X thing, and I put it into my timetable. But then I also said on a Wednesday afternoon, when everyone's off, you can go out with your friends. Something that works really well for this is time blocking, using like a time blocking schedule to be able to visualize like what you're doing in every hour. And this is so necessary if you're someone who wants to overcome something like a failure that you've been through. You have to change your routine, because that's a lot of the time that is the problem. But like I said, you need to also give yourself time to do something fun, do exercise, do something that you enjoy to kind of break up those kind of intense work sessions. What I learned is being resilient really comes down to knowing when to work hard and working hard, but also knowing how and when to recharge. The sixth thing and the last thing that I did was I asked myself, who am I surrounded with? Why have things changed so suddenly after I started a new university? So I said to myself, you need to start to engage with masterminds and great thinkers. I realized that my peers that I was hanging around with were people that were very excited about going out and the uni experience and freshers, and I was joining in with that experience, not thinking about the reality of I'm in a university and I need to pass my grades. Whereas in my high school, I was with friends with like high achievers and top set, and I was with people who were going to achieve really well. So I was naturally doing what they were doing, and we were all having a good time. But when I went to university, now I'm with new people who I don't know, and I realized that they were definitely impacting my productivity and kind of my mindset. So some ways that I did this was I joined like study groups. I thought about, I looked at who in the class was doing really well. I looked at who in my group was applying for things, and I kind of like tagged along, and I kind of made friends with them. And I wanted to have that positive kind of environment around me. You tend to find, and I'm sure if you think about your university or your school, geniuses or people that are smart tend to flock together. There'll be a group of like nerds, right? Because they know that being surrounded by high-level thinkers will uplift their own thinking. And what we did, because I joined these like high-level thinking groups, they were able to like share resources with me, tell me what they were up to, tell me what extracurricular things they were applying for, and I was able to do all of those things with them because I was in those groups. So take a look at your environment and ask yourself, if you're failing, who is it around you, and are they failing too? Because if they are, you will as well. And I know it's a harsh reality, but you are the sum of who your friends are. But failure does not mean that you're not going to succeed in the future. Like I said, you would never think that I had failed because of the successes that came later. So I'd highly recommend, if you have failed something or you feel like you're not achieving, think about the 6 things that I did to be able to take myself out of that failure and into a place of success and continue, like sustainable success. It wasn't just a one-hit wonder where I was successful for another semester. I was successful continuously and throughout my educational experience, to the point that I was able to do a PhD, and now I can talk about education and academia so easily because I learned all the kind of tools and tricks and tips. If you enjoyed this, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and I'd love to hear more from you. And let me know, like, how has your first year gone, or your first semester, or like, have you come back from failure that you found it difficult to come back from, and what was the one thing that took you out of that space? I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.